Imagine spending your entire life working to pay off your family home, only to realize that, well, dying might cost your children half of everything you built.
Yeah, that is a terrifying thought for any parent.
It really is. And welcome to the deep dive. We are looking at a massive stack of sources today.
A really massive stack.
Right, ranging from progressive policy blueprints and official city memos to fierce critiques from Black middle-class homeowners, local news watchdogs, and, political commentators.
We have a lot of ground to cover.
We do. Our mission today, we are going to unpack the highly controversial economic platform of New York City's Democratic Socialist mayor, Zohran Mamdani.
Right, and it is a platform that would fundamentally change the city.
Exactly. We will explore his sweeping goals to guarantee universal childcare and permanently free transit. And then we'll dig into the explosive tax proposals he plans to use to pay for it all.
Because someone has to pay for it.
Always. And looking at the sheer scale of these policies, I mean, it is honestly amazing. We are talking about fundamentally reshaping how one of the biggest, most complex cities in the world operates.
And trying to do it almost overnight.
Right.
It is a massive shift. And, to truly grasp the situation, you have to look past the political slogans.
Yeah, the bumper sticker versions of the policies.
Exactly. You have to look at how these grand, sweeping ideological goals actually collide with the day-to-day math of living in New York City.
The actual dollars and cents.
Right. We are watching a real-time test case of what happens when a utopian political vision meets the hard, unforgiving economic realities of a municipal budget.
And before we get into the fierce backlash that is currently dominating the headlines, we need to lay out exactly what Mayor Mamdani is actually trying to build.
Because on paper, some of this sounds incredible.
It really does. I mean, he is proposing a suite of incredibly ambitious social programs.
Very ambitious.
First up, he wants to implement a universal pre-kindergarten system. And he wants to give free baby baskets to all new families.
Right, the baby baskets.
Yeah, and these baskets would include, diapers, baby wipes, nursing supplies, basically taking the sting out of those really expensive first few months of parenthood.
Which is a huge relief for new parents. But he also wants to go further and permanently eliminate MTA bus fares across the entire city.
Wait, completely free buses for everyone?
Completely free. This follows a pilot program he backed earlier that made certain bus routes fare-free.
Okay, and did that pilot actually work?
Well, the data from that pilot showed it primarily helped New Yorkers earning under $28,000 a year.
Which makes sense.
Right, so he wants to expand that citywide. And on top of that, he wants to freeze subway fares at $2.75.
So they stop creeping up every few years.
Exactly, freeze it permanently.
Okay, so that's transit. And then there is the housing plan.
Yes, the housing plan.
This is where things get really sweeping in our sources. He is chasing what is called the Vienna model.
The Vienna model, yeah.
Right. He essentially wants to treat housing as a guaranteed human right rather than, a private asset to be bought and sold for profit.
Which is a fundamental shift in how Americans view real estate.
Totally. And to do this, our sources say he plans to build 200,000 new rent-stabilized units using union labor.
200,000 is a massive number of units.
It's huge. He also wants to expand these things called community land trusts and even authorize the city to forcibly take over housing units if landlords neglect them.
Which is highly controversial.
I mean, it sounds like he is trying to turn New York City into a giant all-inclusive resort.
An all-inclusive resort. I like that analogy.
Yeah, where the basic daily amenities, your travel, your kids, your rent are just covered, like room service.
Right. And what's fascinating here is the underlying philosophy driving all of these plans.
What's the philosophy?
It's a concept called decommodification.
Decommodification.
Right. The administration firmly believes that basic human needs like transit, housing, and childcare simply should not be run for profit.
Okay.
And, to be fair, they point to a very real, crushing crisis to justify this shift.
Oh, absolutely.
Our sources show that childcare in New York City currently costs families over $20,000 a year.
$20,000 per child.
Per child, every single year.
That's a mortgage payment.
It is, and that astronomical cost actively drives young working talent out of the city.
Because they literally cannot afford to work and pay for daycare at the same time.
Exactly. The administration argues that making these services free or heavily subsidized isn't just nice to have.
Right. It's not a luxury.
No, they argue it is essential just to keep the city functioning, to keep young families from fleeing to the suburbs.
Okay, I think everyone can agree that paying 20 grand a year for daycare is brutal.
Oh, without a doubt.
But the all-inclusive resort idea always hits a wall. The math on the back of the napkin reveals a huge
A
problem.
very big problem.
Who exactly is paying the bill for all this room service?
Right. The money has to come from somewhere.
And that question brings us directly into the proposed tax hikes, which is where this whole platform gets incredibly controversial in our sources.
Exactly. To fund all this free transit and childcare, Mamdani's plan relies heavily on shifting the financial burden to the wealthiest residents and to massive corporations,
Okay, so tax the rich.
basically. He proposes raising the corporate tax rate from 7.25% to 11.5%.
That's a pretty big jump.
It is. And he also proposes what he pitches as a, quote, 2% income tax increase on residents making over $1 million a year.
Okay, let's unpack this, because I
Yeah.
want to stop you there.
Sure.
Our watchdog sources highlighted a crucial bit of wordplay with that 2% number.
Percentage points.
Yes, it is not a 2% increase on their current tax bill. It is actually a 2 percentage point increase on the tax rate itself.
That is a vital distinction.
It is.
Let's break down the math so it makes sense in the real world. Right now, the top city income tax rate is roughly 3.88%.
Right.
Mamdani wants to raise it to 5.88%.
Right. So let's put that into human scale numbers. If a high earner was paying, say, $100,000 in city income taxes under the old rate.
Which is a lot of taxes.
Right.
Yeah.
This tiny 2% change actually means they are suddenly writing a check for over $152,000.
Exactly.
When you do the actual math, that represents a massive 52% jump in the actual dollars those individuals pay to the city.
52% more money coming out of the pockets.
Right.
And that massive jump triggers a very specific economic reaction.
What happens?
Well, when a local government vastly expands spending and relies almost entirely on its highest earners to fund it, they risk something economists call capital flight.
Capital flight, meaning money just leaves.
Exactly. You have to remember, the rich in New York City already pay up to 45% of their income in combined federal, state, and city taxes.
Almost half their income.
Right. If you push that number too high, they don't just sit there and pay it.
They have options.
They do. They hire accountants, they pack up, and they move their official residency to a state like Florida.
Which has zero state income tax.
Exactly. Zero.
How does that actually work, though? I mean, can they just buy a condo in Miami and claim they live there while still running their business in Manhattan?
The rule is usually 183 days.
183 days.
Right. If a wealthy New Yorker lives in Florida for 183 days out of the year,
Which is just over half the year.
exactly, just over half, then Florida becomes their primary domicile for tax purposes.
Oh, wow.
They could still spend the other half of the year in New York, enjoying the city, going to shows, but New York legally cannot touch their primary income anymore.
Because they are technically Florida residents?
Right. And because New York relies on a tiny fraction of ultra-wealthy residents for a huge portion of its tax
A
base,
huge portion.
when just a few of those billionaires change their residency, massive chunks of tax revenue vanish instantly.
Oof.
Gone.
Gone.
Which brings us to the $5.4 billion problem.
The deficit.
Right. The sources mention the city is staring down a projected $5.4 billion budget deficit.
That is a massive hole.
It is. So Mamdani has a contingency plan.
A backup plan.
Yeah. If the state blocks his millionaire tax, or if the billionaires just, leave for Florida, his backup plan is to pass a 9.5% overall property tax hike.
Just to close that gap?
Exactly. But wait, I'm stuck on something here.
What's that?
Looking at the numbers from the political commentators and the critics, Mamdani actually increased the overall city budget by $14 billion over 2 years.
Yes. Spending has surged.
Right. And also, public school enrollment dropped by 12%.
Fewer kids in school. Exactly. Yet the education budget somehow increased by nearly $10 billion.
The math is very hard to reconcile there.
So isn't he creating the massive deficit he is now trying to tax his way out of?
That is
Imagine finding out
exactly
your
the
electric
argument his
bill
critics are
is
making.
secretly
Yay.
funding the
They argue
government's
the
massive
deficit is
spending
entirely
addiction.
It
self-inflicted
is a
by
pretty
aggressive
shocking
overspending.
realization when you
Because
actually look
they're
at the math.
spending money
Right.
they don't have.
Well,
Exactly.
imagine for a second
But,
that you have a savings
regardless of how the hole got dug,
And,
it has to be filled.
The bill
you
comes
swore to your
due.
family.
Right. Hand over
And if
heart.
the millionaires leave,
That this money
the city
was
has to
strictly
target a
for
different
fixing
asset.
a leaking
Okay.
roof.
Which brings us to that backup plan.
Yeah.
If we don't fix this 9.5% house property tax hike.
It's an existential crisis. Unlike a billionaire,
exactly.
a brick
it's the save
building
the house
cannot
fund.
pack its bags and move
your
to
car
Boca
breaks
Raton.
down. Exactly. It
Spend a
can't
little
flee.
too much on groceries.
Property
You got
taxes
bills
are
piling
tying
up.
to the physical
So
asset.
what do you do?
The building
raid
is
the roof
stuck
fund.
there.
Right.
You take
but
that
here's
money,
how that
pay off your
actually
credit
plays out in the
cards,
real
and tell your
world.
family, hey,
A
don't worry, we'll fix the roof
9.5%
later.
hike does not just
And in
hit
this scenario,
wealthy,
the
cigar-smoking landlords, or
Who
at
does
least
it hit?
Maryland's
It
climate
directly
goals.
hits
every day.
And the car is a
50
massive
self-inflicted
self-inflicted
who own their homes.
Because their tax bill goes up by 10%.
State budget
Exactly.
deficit.
And
A
for the
completely
millions
avoidable
of people
deficit, I
who
might
rent
add.
in New York
Welcome
City.
to the deep dive.
Which is most of the city.
Today we're
Right.
exploring a
Landlords
classic
do
case
not
of
just
fiscal sleight of hand
absorb a
coming out of
10%
Annapolis.
tax hike.
We
out
are
of the
looking at
goodness
the
of their hearts.
Strategic Energy
Obviously
Investment
not.
Fund.
They bake
The
that new
SAFE.
tax into their
It's a
operating
huge
costs.
pot of
Yeah.
money.
So when your
meant to
lease is
save
up
the
for
environment.
renewal,
But it's
that
turning into a
property
hidden
tax gets
tax
passed
on every
directly
single person
down to you
paying an electric
in the
bill
form of
in
higher
Maryland.
rent.
So the
It
working
really
class
is. It's become the
renters
center
end
of
up
a
paying it.
huge political
Exactly.
fight.
The
You've
very
got
working
a
class
Democratic
renters, these
governor,
socialist
frustrated
policies
environmentalists
are
making
meant
some
to
very
help
awkward
end up
compromises, and
quietly
conservative
footing the
critics who
bill.
are
Okay,
rightly
so
calling
the
this whole
property
thing a
tax hike
shell
affects
game.
A shell game.
everyone.
And when you look at the
But
documents
while
we
the
have today,
millionaire's tax and the
reports,
property tax
budget
grab all the big
proposals, critiques
headlines,
from Senate
the
Republicans,
most
it
explosive
is
detail
really
in
hard
our
to unsee
sources
it.
Our mission
actually
for this deep
targets
dive
people
is
who
simple.
do not consider
Follow the
themselves
money.
rich at all.
Always
Not at
follow
all.
the money.
It is the
We are going to
estate
see
tax.
how
is
a
a
fund
huge point of
designed to
contention.
fight
It
climate
really is.
change
The plan
is being
drastically
used to plug
lowers
holes
the
in the state
threshold
budget.
for who gets hit when
And we'll
they
dig
die.
into the
Let's look at the
argument that
numbers.
this isn't
Yeah.
found money at
Right
all.
now,
This
you
is
only pay
essentially a
estate
backdoor
taxes if
tax
you leave
on
behind
families.
assets worth
Let's
more
get
than
right into it.
$7.1
The Strategic
million.
Energy Investment Fund,
which
sounds
covers
very
true
official, very
millionaires.
important.
Right.
What does it actually
But
do?
Mamdani wants to slash
on
that
paper,
threshold
it is
all
the
the way
state's
down to just
green piggy
$750,000.
The SIF is managed
A
by the
huge drop.
Maryland Energy
Massive.
Administration.
At the same
its whole
time,
stated purpose
he wants
is
to
to
raise
reduce
the
energy
top
bills,
estate tax
cut
rate
waste, and
from
fund
16%
renewable
to
energy.
50%.
Like solar
Wait,
panels and
50%.
efficiency upgrades.
Half.
Exactly.
Half
But
of the
here
estate,
is the
yes.
real aha moment of this
And
story.
on top of that, the threshold
Where
for
does the
city's
money
mansion
actually
tax
come from?
drops to
Because they aren't just taxing you
$500,000
directly
and
for
there
it.
is a new
No,
1%
and that's why politicians
surcharge
absolutely love
added
it.
to
It
home
feels free.
sales over
So about 40%
$1
comes from
million.
regional carbon
This is a
auctions.
radical redefinition
But the big
of who
chunk,
is
the
considered
one
wealthy.
growing like
It
crazy,
really is.
comes from
Let's
something
look at
called
the statistics
alternative
to understand why
compliance
this is
payments,
causing absolute
or
panic.
ACPs.
Okay.
Which is
Hit me
just a
with the
fancy
stats.
government term
Average
for a
home
fine.
prices
Right.
in
It's a
every
fine for
single
failure.
borough
Let me break
except
it
the
down.
Bronx,
Maryland
which
law
averages
forces
around
utility companies to
480,000
buy
to
a certain amount of green
497,000,
energy. They have to
exceeds
prove they're using
$700,000.
renewables. So
But if they
almost
can't
any
find that green energy, or if it's
basic,
just way too expensive on the
unrenovated
market,
family home
Which it
in
usually
Queens
is.
or Brooklyn
Yeah, the state
easily
gives them an
falls
escape
into
tax.
this new tax trap.
The utility
Almost
can
all
just
of them.
pay a fee
It's like moving the
directly to the
goalposts
state
in the middle of the
instead.
game.
That fee
You
is
buy
the
a modest
ACP.
house in Queens
here's
in
the
the
kicker.
1990s for
Utilities are
$150,000.
increasingly
You
just
pay your
paying the
mortgage
fine
every
because
month.
it's cheaper
The
than
crazy
actually
New York
buying
real
the green
estate market
energy.
Wait,
inflates
so
its paper
the climate
value
fund
to
is getting
$800,000.
incredibly rich, which you didn't ask for.
Precisely
Exactly, and
because
suddenly,
the
upon
green
your
energy
death,
mandates are
the
failing.
city treats your
Precisely.
primary
It is a
residence like a
completely
Rockefeller
perverse
estate.
incentive.
And to
The
understand the
government made the
real-world
mandate
consequence
so
of that,
aggressive, and the market
we need
is
to
so
explain the
distorted
mechanics
that
of
power
probate.
companies are just
What is
writing checks
probate?
to the state
Probate
instead of going
is
green.
essentially
And the
the
stats on
legal
this are just
purgatory your
staggering.
assets
They
go
are.
into when you die.
In 2022,
Grim.
this revenue
Very.
was $77
When you
million.
pass away,
By
your house doesn't
2025,
just
it
magically
jumped to
slide into your children's bank account.
$365
The
million.
government steps in,
Wow.
assesses the value of everything you own, and before your kids can touch a dime or
Right, so
take
now
the
the
deed to
state
the
has
house,
this
the state demands
massive
its cut.
accidental pot
Okay.
of gold.
And here's
It's
the kicker.
supposedly for green
Estate
projects.
taxes must
But
be
remember,
paid to
that
the
money
government
didn't just
in
fall
cash.
out of the sky.
Wait,
The utility
in
companies
cash,
paid those
you cannot
funds.
just give the
And do you
government the
think
guest
those
bedroom?
massive
You cannot.
corporations just eat that
If you
cost out
pass
of the
away
goodness
and
of
leave
their
your
hearts?
adult children a
Oh,
home
absolutely not.
valued
They
at
pass
$800,000,
every single penny of that onto
and
the
they suddenly
customer.
face
Exactly,
a
it shows up
massive
right
50%
on your electric bill.
tax
So
liability
you,
on that
the everyday
property.
ratepayer,
Like
are paying for the utility's
$400,000.
failure to meet
Right.
a government mandate.
They need hundreds
The
of
state
thousands
collects
of
your money,
dollars in liquid
drops
cash
it in the
to
safe,
pay
and
the
says,
government.
"Look at all this cash
Just
we have
sitting
for
in
the
a
climate."
checking account.
Which brings us to the
Exactly.
raid.
If your kids are just
Because that
normal
money is
working
definitely
class
not
people
staying
who
in the
don't
climate
have that
fund.
kind of cash.
Not anymore.
Which most
Enter
people
Governor
don't.
Wes Moore.
Exactly. The
His
government
administration
forces
is staring
them to
down a
liquidate.
projected
To sell the
$1.5
Yes.
billion budget
They have to sell the
deficit.
family home
1.5
just to pay the
billion.
tax bill.
You can't
It's
just
like the
ignore
city
a
is
whole that
treating
deep.
these family
You can't.
homes as a
And
municipal
when government
ATM,
overspends to that
That's a
degree,
good way to
they
put
start
it.
checking
But the
under
families
couch
don't have
cushions
the
for
PM,
loose
and every
change.
time the city makes a
Except
withdrawal
here,
to
the
pay for
couch
summer's
cushion
free
is the
bus
green
fare,
energy fund,
the family
and
loses
the
a
loose
brick from
change
their
is
own
hundreds
house.
of millions
It's wealth
of taxpayer
extraction.
dollars.
Yeah.
So what's the
And
actual
this
proposal?
reality
How much
of
are they
forced
taking?
The
property
governor's
sales
plan
brings us to the
diverts
most passionate,
$292
targeted
million
pushback
directly
from
from the
the
SAF
SAF
into
The
the
backlash
state's
from the
general
community.
fund.
Right.
Just to
It is
balance
the
the books.
profound
Just to
impact
cover
this
their
will have on the black
overspending.
middle class.
This is a
They
crucial
are
part of the
using
story.
energy
It really
funds funds to
is.
pay for
Local
general
outlets like
government
Black Westchester and the
operations.
New York Post
Bureaucracy,
interviewed
salaries,
everyday
office
residents who
supplies,
feel
you name
directly
it.
targeted
But that's
by
not
this
even
change.
all of
They're
it.
very
I read in
angry.
the sources
We
there's
hear
also
from
a
people.
rebate scheme.
Like
Yes,
77-year-old
critics are
retired
calling
nurse
a political
Lorraine
sweetener
Smith.
Singleton.
They're grabbing another $100
And
million
58-year-old
out of
consultant
the
James
fund
Chavis
to give
from
a
Queens.
one-time
Real
$40
Yes,
rebate
real
to eligible
people.
households.
They argue this
$40.
policy
Earbus.
actively
So let me get this
punishes
straight.
Black
The
residents
state
who spent
mandates
decades
drive up
working
energy costs.
to achieve stability.
The utility companies pass those
incredibly hard
massive
won
costs to
stability.
you and me.
Exactly.
Our
Put
bills
yourself in
go up
James
by
Chavis's
hundreds
shoes
of
for a
dollars a
second.
year.
You bought
And
a
then the
house
governor
in
takes a
Queens
chunk
30
of our
years
own
ago.
money,
Okay.
You
hands
played
us
by
back
all the
a
rules.
crisp
You paid your
$40
taxes.
bill,
You
and
maintained
basically
your
says,
property.
you're
did
welcome.
everything right.
That is
Right.
the exact
And now
it's
you're being
wild.
told
And if you
the
look at the
home
recent
you plan to
supplemental
leave your
budget,
kids
they're
is going to
cutting
be
or shifting
liquidated
another
by the
$80
city
million.
to pay
When
for
you
new
add all this
social
up,
programs.
this raid
You can
depletes
see why
the
this is
fund by
causing an
82%.
absolute uproar.
82%
Oh,
of
a
the
total
fund wiped
uproar.
out.
Yeah,
Wiped
but it
out.
goes deeper
Leaving
than
only
just
about
feeling cheated.
164
million for
There
the
is a
actual
historical
green
context
initiatives
here
it was
regarding
legally
how
meant
wealth
for.
is actually
That is
built
not a
in these
trim.
communities.
That's a
There is
total
a very
gutting.
painful history here.
And
We
this
have
is
to
where
talk
the
about redlining.
politics gets
Redlining.
super interesting.
Yes.
Because you would assume
Decades
the
ago,
environmentalist
banks literally
groups like
drew
the Sierra
red lines on
Club or
city
the
maps
Chesapeake
and
Climate Action
refused to give
Network,
mortgages to Black
you'd assume they'd be
Americans
furious.
in certain neighborhoods.
They
It's
were
systemic
initially
discrimination.
when
Exactly.
this
It was a
first
systemic
leaked. They called
denial
it
of financial
unacceptable.
services.
They said
Oh.
it was a huge
So when these families
mistake
finally
to
broke
use this
through and
money
managed
as
to
a
buy
petty
homes in
cash
places like
drawer.
Southeast
But
Queens,
then they folded.
Which was
They
a
completely
huge
folded.
achievement.
a massive
Now they
achievement.
are actually
That
supporting
house
parts
became
of the
their
governor's
ultimate
spending plan.
and often their only
Talk about strange
financial anchor.
bedfellows. Right.
For
Why
these
on earth
families,
would they do
wealth
that?
is not held
If
in
they
diverse
truly
stock
believe climate
portfolios
change is
or
an
trust
existential
funds or
crisis,
offshore accounts.
why
All
let
in
the
the
state
house.
raid the
Their wealth
survival
is
fund?
held
It's just
entirely
raw
in the
political
equity of the family
calculation.
home.
They know voters
Which
are getting
makes me
crushed
wanna
by
ask,
inflation
and
and
it is a
high
question
energy
that
bills right
conservative
now.
sources and
If these
watchdogs
green
raise
groups attack a
repeatedly.
$40 rebate,
If
even if it's a
overarching
total
goal
gimmick,
of this administration
they look like they
is
don't care
social
about
justice
working
and
families.
equality,
So they have to
Right.
play the game.
How do they
are
reconcile
swallowing
a
a
policy
very bitter
that
pill.
essentially
In exchange
extracts
for letting
wealth
the
from
governor
minority
raid the
families
fund
and
today,
forces them to sell
they
their
are
only
lobbying for a
major
new
asset?
law to create a funding
if we
floor
connect
in the
this
future.
to the bigger
Meaning
picture,
what exactly?
Meaning
it is the
they
ultimate
want to
collision
guarantee
between two
that the state
totally
will
different
mandate
worldviews.
How so?
roughly
You have socialist
$365
economic
million
ideology on one
a
side
year on
and
climate spending
traditional
moving forward.
American wealth
So they are
building on the
throwing
other.
today's
Right.
The
taxpayers
administration
under the
views
bus
housing
to lock in a
and
permanent
private
claim on
property
your
wealth
wallet later.
as something
That's
that
the
should
gamble.
be redistributed.
And it
A
brings us
collective
right
resource.
to the
Right.
core conservative
In
critique.
their eyes, tapping into
People
the
like
value
Senate
of these
Minority Leader
million-dollar
Steve
homes
Hershey
is a
aren't
fair way
buying
to
this
fund
spin
collective
at all.
programs
Not for a
like
second. Let's
universal
walk through their
child
argument
care
because it
that
really
benefit
exposes the
everyone
math
in the
here.
city today.
They call it the hidden
So the
tax.
current residents
Right.
get the
Let's
benefit.
be
Right.
rigorous about
But
this
for the
logic.
families who spent their
Step
whole lives
one,
paying
the
off
state
a
forces a
30-year
green
mortgage,
mandate that is
that
totally
home is not a
disconnected
collective
from
piggy
economic
bank.
reality.
It is their
Step
personal
two,
legacy.
the utilities
Right.
can't meet
This
it, so they
policy
pay the massive
transforms
fine.
homeownership.
Step 3,
It stops
utilities
being a
raise your
reliable
electric
tool
rates to
for
cover the
building
fine.
generational
Step
wealth
four,
for your
the
children.
state
And what
grabs
does it
that fine
become?
money
It
to pay
becomes a
for general
mechanism for
government
wealth
bloat.
extraction
Exactly.
to
So, in
balance the
effect,
city's
the state
municipal
is
budget.
taxing
Wow.
electricity users to pay
So we
for
have
the
these
DMV or
massive
state salaries
utopian social
without ever
promises
having to
on
publicly
one
vote
side,
on a tax
Right.
hike.
and this
Hershey says
fierce,
Maryland
deeply
families are being
personal
double billed.
middle class
You pay your
outrage
regular
on the
income
other.
taxes,
Which brings us
and
to
then
the
you pay
politics
this
of it all.
massive surcharge
Exactly.
on your electric
How
bill.
does a swooping
It's
plan like this
incredibly
actually
sneaky.
become
It's
law?
politically convenient.
Because
Yeah.
the mayor
And
can't
there's
just
a
snap
second
his
layer to
fingers
this
and change the
criticism,
tax
the
code.
sheer
No, he cannot.
hypocrisy of it
That
all.
brings
this
us to
is
the
the
political
most
showdown
glaring
currently
part.
paralyzing the state
Politicians
government.
constantly
Right,
tell
because
us
New York
climate
City
change
does
is
not
an
operate in a
existential
vacuum.
threat.
It's part
they
of
say
the
the world
state.
is burning. Exactly.
Code
The city
red
cannot
for
just raise
humanity.
income
Right.
taxes
We
on
have
its millionaires
zero
whenever it
time to
wants.
waste.
So
Why not?
critics are
By
asking a
law,
very simple, they require permission from the state government in
If
Albany
this is the most
to
urgent
change
crisis
the
in
income
human
tax
history.
rate.
Oh, I
Why
see.
is the climate
And
fund
right now,
the very
Governor
first thing
Kathy
you raid
Hochul is
when you
firmly
overspend your
blocking
budget?
the
You
millionaire
don't
tax
raid your
at the
life-saving
state level?
surgery fund to pay
So
off
what
what does this all mean?
Exactly.
The governor
critics
says
argue
no to
this
taxing
proves
the
the whole
rich.
climate panic is
How
just
does
rhetoric.
Mamdani respond?
When push
In
comes to
response,
shove,
Mamdani
keeping
is
the government
threatening to pull the
bureaucracy
trigger
fully
on
funded
that
is way more
9.5%
important to them
property
than the
tax
green
hike we
projects
talked
they
about.
claim
The
are
backup
vital for
plan.
our
The
survival.
backup plan.
They treat the
And
fund
he's
like
threatening
a
to
slush
dip
fund,
into the
and
city's
it
emergency
entirely
reserves
undermines
as
their
his
moral authority.
contingency plan.
If the money isn't
sounds
sacred,
risky.
then the crisis
It is.
clearly isn't
Democratic
as urgent as they
Socialist
claim on cable
campaign
news.
leaders are
Let's
taking
talk
to the
about the
press,
real-world
publicly
consequences of
demanding
this.
that Governor
Because
Hochul
while
pick a
politicians
side.
are
Oh,
moving
wow.
hundreds of
Yeah.
millions around
They're
on
framing
spreadsheets,
this massive
it affects the
property tax
actual
hike as,
grid.
quote,
What gets
Hochul's
left
tax
behind
on
when you
homeowners.
drain
So they're blaming
82%
her
of the fund?
Entirely.
Well, programs
They're
for
telling the
electric
public,
heat pumps for low-income
if she
households
refuses
get
to approve our
slashed.
tax on
And
the super
a heat
rich,
pump actually lowers
she
the
is
bill
forcing
for
us to
maybe
tax your homes
15 to 20 years.
So
Right.
if we look
Instead,
at the
they're
mechanics of this,
sacrificing
it
long-term
sounds like the mayor is
infrastructure for
playing a
$40
massive game of political
handout
chicken with
that
the
might
governor.
cover your
That is
groceries
exactly
for
what is
2
happening.
days.
And he
They're
is
also
using
cutting
a
electric
nearly
school
10%
buses,
induction
property tax
stoves,
hike
solar
on everyday
projects.
New Yorkers.
But here's the
as his
ultimate
leverage.
reality
It is
check.
absolute
Even
political
before
leverage.
this rate,
But
with
why
all this
property
massive
taxes?
spending spending
The
was
reason the
Maryland
mayor is
actually
using property
hitting its
taxes as
climate
his
targets.
weapon is
No.
deeply structural.
Not even close.
Okay.
The
While the
Climate
city needs
Solutions Now
Albany's
Act
permission to
demands
touch
a 60%
income taxes,
emissions reduction
the city
by
controls
2031.
property taxes
60%, that's a
entirely.
massive target.
It's huge.
They don't need
but a
permission for
University of
that.
Maryland
Right.
analysis
They don't need the
shows
governor's
that under
signature to
current
raise property
policies, the
taxes.
state is only going to
It's
hit
the
40
easiest,
to
most
45%.
accessible lever for the local
They are
government to
miles
pull.
behind.
So the homeowners
So
are
we
just
are missing
sitting
the
ducks.
target. The grid is
Basically,
getting more
this is
expensive.
exactly what happens
And
when
now,
grand,
the money intended to fix
ideological
it
visions
is
hit the
being
brick
flushed
wall
into the general
of fiscal
fund to
reality
cover a
and
deficit.
state law.
It is a
Right.
cascade of
The
failure.
city needs
The
billions
administration
of
says they
dollars
can
to
walk
fund
and
its
chew
utopian
gum at the
vision
same
of free
time,
transit
meaning
and
balance the
childcare.
budget and save
But
the
the
planet.
state won't let them tax
But
the rich.
you can't drain the
Right.
fuel tank and
The
expect
state
the car
refuses
across
to
the
let
finish
them
line.
tax the rich.
And
to
think
pay
about
for
grid
it.
stability.
So the city
When you
threatens the
force
only
these
people they
transitions
can.
faster
Yes.
than technology allows,
They squeeze
and you
the only
penalize
asset they have total
reliable energy
control over.
sources,
Mhm.
costs
and
explode,
the only asset
and the
that
grid
cannot
gets
run
fragile.
away to
That's
Florida.
exactly
The
why those
homes of
fines are
everyday
so high.
residents.
Reliable
Precisely.
green
This
energy
has been a
just isn't
truly
available at
fascinating
the
look
scale the
into
law
a
demands.
highly complex
So the state is
situation.
literally
very
penalizing
complex.
the grid
Today,
for the laws
we
of
unpack
physics
the
and
pursuit
economics.
of a
And instead of
decommodified
fixing the
city,
bad
a
policy,
vision of a
instead of
society
admitting
with
the
guaranteed
mandates are
transit,
unrealistic,
free childcare,
the
and
government
housing
just treats
treated
the
as a
fines
human
as a
right.
new revenue
A
stream.
truly utopian
Which brings
vision.
us back
Right.
to the most
But
disturbing
we also
part of this
explored
whole
the
deep
harsh
dive,
mechanics
the
of
perverse
how
incentive.
paying for that
Let's
vision
really drill
clashes
down
with
on this.
reality.
The
The
state
math
of
always
Maryland
catches
has
up.
a
It does.
$1.5
We looked at the
billion
mechanics of
deficit.
capital
They are
flight,
desperate
the
for
hidden
cash.
sting of the
Right.
estate tax,
And the green
lowering
fund
the
is flush with
threshold,
cash,
and the destruction of
specifically because
generational
utilities
wealth
are
for the
failing
black
to
middle
meet the
class.
green goals.
And the political
So if the
gridlock.
utilities actually
Exactly. The
succeed,
intense political
if they somehow
gridlock between
went
city and state
100%
leaders
green
fighting over
tomorrow
who
and
holds
stopped
the
paying
bill.
fines.
You know, when you look at
The
all the
state budget would
sources,
instantly
from the
lose
progressive
hundreds of
blueprints to
millions
the
of dollars.
fierce
Exactly.
conservative
The
pushback,
government
It
now
really
has a
leaves us
massive
with one
financial
final,
interest in the
vital
utilities
question
failing.
to ponder.
If the
What's that?
utilities succeed, the
If
revenue
a city
completely dries
successfully
up, and the
guarantees a
governor is
high
left with an
baseline
even
quality of
bigger
life for
hole in his
everyone,
budget.
free
That is
buses,
just
free
wild. They've
pre-K,
written a
rent
massive conflict
stabilization,
of interest
Right.
directly into the
but
state budget.
in doing
It's a
so,
total dependency on
eliminates
failure.
the ability
The
for
state
everyday
needs dirty
families to
energy
pass
fines
down
to
the
pay
wealth
its
they
daily
built to their
bills.
own children.
It's like a doctor
Yeah.
who only gets paid
Does that
if the patient
redefine the
stays
American
sick.
dream
And
or
meanwhile,
destroy it?
the
That
patient,
is a
the
thought that will
hardworking
definitely
taxpayer,
stick
is
with
getting
you
billed
long
from
after
every
the deep
direction.
dive is
You
over.
pay the tax.
Imagine
you pay the
spending your
hidden
life
tax on your
paying off
electric
that
rate.
house, only
What
to
do you get?
wonder
A
who
$40
really gets to
check
keep
and a
it in
promise
the end.
they'll try
It's a
harder
tough pill
next
to
year.
swallow.
It
It
is.
really makes
Well, thank you
look
so
at
much
that
for
utility
joining us
bill
for this
differently,
deep dive
doesn't it?
today, and
When
we'll
you
catch
see
you next
those
time.
vague